Good morning and welcome to our last lesson in botany. Today I just wanted to go over some really strange ways that botanists define what a certain plant is, how they classify it. We've begun this block with classification of plants, and I didn't get too deep into it other than talking about different ways that they classify plants, which really are pretty significantly different. They can categorize them by seed type. They can categorize them by the stems, the roots, the leaves, the family, whether it falls into this type of thing that produces by spores, whether it, so there's all types of different ways that they classify fruits and vegetables and just all kinds of plants. But there's some really bizarre ones. Some of us know, for instance, that a tomato is like, oh, well, that's a fruit and not a vegetable, but everybody thinks it's a vegetable. But really, there's a lot of surprising things, and I thought I would reveal some of those to you today. So, things that are fruits that we actually thought were vegetables. Some of this list may be surprising, some might not. An avocado is a fruit. A pumpkin is a fruit. Zucchini is a fruit. A cucumber is a fruit. Bell peppers are a fruit. Jalapeno peppers are a fruit. Corn is a fruit. Green peas are a fruit. Eggplant, also a fruit. Okra is a fruit. And of course, I said tomato is a fruit. But now we need to look over at, if all of those things are fruits and not vegetables, what the heck is a vegetable? So a vegetable, a lot of time, it's just like the leaf of a thing or the stem of a thing. But some of those things are also flowers. So for instance, broccoli, cauliflower, and many types of cabbage, those are actually flowers. And something that you might not know also, rhubarb seems like a fruit. People make rhubarb pie. And rhubarb is actually a vegetable. So that does classify as a vegetable, even though people use it in a fruit context to make pie. Vegetable pie doesn't sound too appealing, but if you really enjoy rhubarb, it is. Okay, so if those are fruits and not vegetables, let's look over at the family of berries. And berries have a pretty specific definition of having the fruit being around the seed. So if the fruit is around the seed, then that turns the thing into a berry. And if the seed is outside the fruit, then it's not a berry anymore, unfortunately, at least botanically speaking, even if we think of it as a berry. So things that we think of as berries that aren't really berries are strawberries, blackberries, and raspberries. And you're like, well, then what is a berry? Bananas. Bananas are a berry because the fruit is outside the seeds. Tomato is a berry. It's a fruit and it's a berry. Kiwi is a berry. And in fact, if you've tried the little kiwi berries, they have these little berries called kiwi berries. Pomegranates are a berry. Avocados are a berry. Chili peppers are a berry. And guess what? Those tiny little things called watermelons, those are also berries because they have the fruit and then they have the seeds on the inside of the fruit. Since we looked at those, let's take a peek over at nuts. And to be considered a nut botanically, it just means that there's no outside fruit around the nut, right? And that the shell doesn't open up to release the seed. So it's actually pretty tricky to botanically be considered a nut. And a lot of things that have nut in the name are not actually nuts. Acorns are a nut. There's no fruit around that outside of the acorn, so that's a good example. And the shell doesn't open to release the seed. Chestnuts, hazelnuts, and hickory nuts are nuts. And cola nuts, which actually provide that Coca-Cola flavor, are nuts. Now, things that are not nuts, that we often think of as nuts, are coconuts, almonds, Brazil nuts, cashews, macadamia nuts, peanuts, pecans, pine nuts, pistachios, and walnuts. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, why do we even have this category of nuts if none of the nuts in there are actually nuts? Well, then we need to look at seeds. And There are different types of seeds. So there's non-fruiting seeds, and then there's also fruit seeds. Now, some of these will be obvious because last Friday we talked about coffee and we talked about chocolate, and there's actually a fruit around that thing. In fact, in some places they eat and really enjoy the fruits of that. And in the United States, coffee has made this comeback. The actual fruit has been used to make this superfoods drink because it's actually really healthy for you. Now, while we use the thing that we call that coffee bean, guess what? The coffee bean is not a bean. And it's not a nut. It's actually a fruit seed because it's the seed of what is a fruit. So fruit seeds or drupes include coffee, olives, coconut, pistachios, almonds, prunes, apricots, cherries, nectarines, peach, plum, and cacao. Now, if that weren't bizarre enough, a lot of these are also in the rose family, and they're related. Things that are in the rose family because they produce this rose family type of flower include prunes or plums, apricots, peaches, cherries, and nectarines, and almonds as well. So these are these are all in the rose family, and you would maybe never guess it. Maybe you'll get a chance to smell some flowers like that, before they go to fruit and before they become something else. But then you have this other category of non-fruit seeds. And non-fruit seeds are seeds that come from a thing that don't have fruits. Some of these non-fruit seeds include pine nuts, which come from those conifers or the cones, the pine cones, macadamia nuts, Brazil nuts, quinoa, which is a seed. It's not even really a grain. They call it a pseudo grain, which means it's kind of a grain. And those are non-fruit seeds. So, I guess lastly, we'll look over at the legumes family, which are the beans and peas. And peanuts actually do fit in that category as well. Peanuts, if they're not a nut, they are a non-fruit seed, but then that also puts them, they're not a nut, but more of a pea. So they fit in that beans family. What doesn't fit in the beans family is vanilla. Vanilla bean is not a bean. It's actually an orchid. And it's that stemmy part of the orchid that we end up harvesting. If you've ever seen vanilla, that sort of pod-looking thing, it's a long, thin, dark brown pod. Smells absolutely amazing. It's no surprise that people decided that they wanted to use it for cooking. And it's really good when you add it to certain dishes. It gives it that yummy vanilla flavor, the authentic vanilla, which is a little hard to find and pretty expensive. That's it for Bizarre Botany. I hope you enjoyed this block. And ultimately, rather than just doing this for humor, it is good to stay curious and to keep your eyes out and not literally outside your body, but just have them open and look around and be aware of what's out there in the world. It's nice to look outside and see some pretty cool things. I hope that you all have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday, unless you're watching this at a much later date, and then I probably won't see you on Monday. All right, have a great time.